which can be quite which will not only affect the wildlife, but also will affect us humans as well. And to me, that is absolutely heartbreaking. The next animal is one of our closest relatives and the largest primate on the planet. It's the mountain gorilla. Gorillas are found, the mountain gorilla is found in the mountainous cloud forests of Rwanda, Uganda, and the Congo. And of course, a fully grown silverback, well, as you can see here, a fully grown silverback would probably be no taller than I am, but he'd be at least 2 times my weight and a lot more muscular. To many people, they are the true King Kong, because gorillas are actually peaceful herbivores, which are animals that feed on plants, and they are only aggressive when they are defending themselves, or more importantly, their family. Unfortunately, nowadays, the mighty silverbacks are not just putting their lives on the line to fight off leopards, crocodiles, and chimps. Today, they are facing human foes, and the strength of the silverback is unable to fight off the poacher's bullets. And of course, gorillas are poached throughout their range. They're hunted for sport, but also for the bushmeat trade, or for their body parts to be sold as ornaments. Quite often, when adult gorillas are killed, the young gorillas are stolen from the wild to be sold on the illegal pet trade, and they're sold as either pets to disreputable zoos, or for tourists to have their photos taken with. And it's believed that there are only about 700 to possibly 1,000 mountain gorillas left in the wild, and they are, to this day, one Africa's probably most protected and looked after animal. But also, like humans, they're also susceptible to the Ebola virus, and it's believed that that virus has wiped out 1/3 of the gorilla population in recent years. And of course, there are people working to do something about this, like in Rwanda and Uganda, and also the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has recently started to bring in more tourists, although with the decades of civil war they've had. Of course, tourism is a good way to protect gorillas, and of course, whenever you go and see gorillas, you always have to wear a face mask, because they're so closely related to us that they're also susceptible to our diseases. Like even a simple cold could prove fatal to a mighty silverback. But of course, that's one way to protect gorillas is with tourism. The next animal is probably the rarest and most threatened member of the dog family. It's the Ethiopian or Abyssinian wolf. The Ethiopian wolf is found in Ethiopia in East Africa, where it is endemic, meaning it's found there and nowhere else on Earth. But over the last few decades, it's been under tremendous pressure. In fact, it's suffered from hunting, habitat loss, and most recently from disease. But of course, the Ethiopian wolf is very different to its grey wolf cousin. It hunts things like giant mole rats. It mainly hunts rodents like mole rats, but of course, and that's mainly down to the fact that there's nothing in places like the Bale Mountains as big as an elk or a moose that has to be brought back down by the whole pack working together. Ethiopian wolves do live in packs, but they tend to hunt alone. But unfortunately, over the last few decades, they have been reduced to as few as 500 individuals left in the wild, so they are teetering on the edge. And the main reason why they're so rare is habitat loss, as Ethiopia's human population has been expanding at a rapid rate, and all those people now need more space to live and to grow their food. And as they take over the land for farming, that's pushing all the wolves into the highest mountain ranges of Ethiopia. giving them very little space to live and raise their own pups. But also a few decades ago, they were blamed for livestock predation and were hunted severely, but of course since then that has been stopped. So, and the real culprits were jackals, leopards and hyenas. But unfortunately these wolves have not just been threatened by the loss of their habitat or hunting by humans, they're also susceptible to a very horrifying disease that affects all members of the canine family. People in Ethiopia, like many people around the world, keep dogs, and unfortunately pet dogs in Ethiopia have one of the highest rates of rabies in the world, a disease which affects all members of the canine family and unfortunately is fatal. And the wolves easily catch rabies when they come into contact with pet or stray dogs, and that can be passed on to members of their pack, which is pushing them closer and closer to extinction. But people are doing something about it. Vaccinations being given to the local dogs to prevent the spread of rabies to the Ethiopian wolves, and efforts are gradually being made to preserve the habitats they live in. So hopefully in 20 or 30 years this population could increase from 500 to maybe a few thousand. The next animal I'm going to show you is probably our closest living relative and the second most intelligent primate on the planet. It is the chimpanzee. Chimpanzees are found in the forests and jungles of Central and Western Africa, as they live in family groups of about 30 animals, although the largest ever recorded family group was in the Ngogo National Park in Central Africa, which was 150 animals. They have enormous brains, so they are very intelligent, and also they are tool users, and chimps have actually learned to use tools. Over the years they've been seen using a wide selection of tools, from using sticks to fish and some termites out of their nests, to using rocks and logs to crack open tough forest nuts, and even using, they've even been documented taking tortoises and actually whacking their shells against the buttress roots of trees. And of course, like humans, chimpanzees can be hunters. They hunt monkeys, small antelope, bush pigs, and even they will occasionally be cannibalistic. And of course, it's actually believed we share between 98 to 99% of our DNA with these animals. And Charles Darwin, who was the greatest naturalist and biologist who ever lived, actually based a lot of his theory on evolution from watching chimpanzees. But this being our closest cousin, it's even more of a tragedy that they're now at risk because of us. Chimpanzees have been classed as endangered, and one of the main reasons for that is we are taking the forests they rely on, cutting them down to make way for plantations, farmland and towns. But there are even more sinister reasons as to why they are at risk because of us. I mean, with the Ebola virus having outbreaks every few years, because that's also been affecting them quite badly. But of course, probably the worst is the bushmeat trade and also the pet trade. Of course, hunters have been taking chimpanzees from the wild, which is illegal. And of course, adult chimps quite often are killed in the wild so that their meats can be taken to markets in Africa and sold as food. And that isn't just dangerous to the chimps, it's also dangerous to humans, because many life-threatening diseases like Ebola, tuberculosis, and botulism, and even malaria can pass between us. But also, young chimps quite often, when their mothers are killed, are taken from the wild to be sold as pets, to disreputable zoos, or for for tourists to have their photos taken with. And quite often, when the cute youngsters turn into big, strong, aggressive adults, they're either abandoned or mistreated. There's actually a sanctuary in the south of England called Monkey World, and a few years ago they had a chimpanzee there named Charlie who was rescued from Spain after spending years as a beach photographer's prop. And when they found Charlie, he was in a very terrible state, and he had all but 3 of his teeth pulled out, which resulted in him having mental issues. He was a drug addict because his owner had given him massive amounts of a relaxation drug to keep him calm and under control. But also he had cataracts, machete wounds to his head, fractured feet and a broken jaw. But he was rescued, the photographer was arrested, and Charlie was taken to Monkey World, where he was rehabilitated and spent the rest of his days very happily. Because while there are people trying to do something to protect chimps, like tourism and armed patrols looking out for them, that is still the problem of these animals going at risk from extinction because of us. Now, the next group of animals I'm going to show you are the lords of the sea, and also some of the most feared and vastly misunderstood of all creatures: sharks. Sharks have been around on the planet for over 400 million years, and they have evolved into the perfect marine predators. And one of the main reasons for that is down to their senses. While we human beings have our senses of sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste, sharks have an extra 2 senses to us. I mean, the first one is their sense of smell. I mean, their sense of smell is said to be incredible. In fact, it's actually believed a shark can smell a teaspoon of blood in an Olympic swimming pool-sized area of water. But also, they have an organ that runs down the length of their bodies called the lateral line, which is laden with hair cells that can pick up the tiny vibrations in the water of, like, that could be struggling prey or even the wake of a fish that's swam past them. But probably the most incredible sense lies in their snout, and in the hammerhead shark, that is probably the most acute, because it's called electroreception. Basically, they have special pores in their snouts that can pick up the electrical fields, like the electrical grid of the planet, and even the electrical signals given off by their prey. Especially with a hammerhead shark, because their head acts almost like a metal detector, and especially in low light and dusk time, when they're, like, even if their prey like fish are hiding on eating and staying very, very still, like even the slight beating of their heart or so much as a slight twitch gives off a weak electrical signal that the sharks can find. So basically you can run, but you can't hide. Of course, one of the reasons why sharks have such a bad reputation is because of the media. I mean, when the movie Jaws came out 51 years ago, it cemented the image of the mindless man-eating monster in the public imagination, but in actual fact, almost all attacks on humans by sharks are quite often cases of mistaken identity. Like if a great white shark attacks someone, it's usually because they are either mistaking them for seals, or if they are, or more than likely, if the shark is trying to see if we are good to eat. But I'll get back to that bit in a moment. And only about 8 to 10 people are killed each year by sharks. And in that time, you're much more likely to be killed by a falling vending machine, or killed being struck by lightning while playing golf and wearing a gorilla suit. And when sharks like this, the whale shark, which is the largest shark on the planet and also the largest fish, is actually a filter feeder, meaning